Welcome to the Mo Show Live, everybody. Hey, I'm Morris Lilienthal. One of the things that I'm truly passionate about is giving back and helping others. And that's one of the things that I really love about being a lawyer is being able to help people. And one of the reasons that my wife and I are so passionate about working with a lot of great nonprofit organizations, and our passion is working with the March of Dimes. And doing that is because I love helping others, and I think that all have an obligation to give back and help others. And our guest today truly embodies these principles. Our guest on the show today is attorney Jere Beasley. Mr. Beasley is the founding member of the Beasley Allen Law Firm that is based out of Montgomery, Alabama. They now have an office in Atlanta. And we're going to be talking to Mr. Beasley today about his background, his legal career, and why he's so passionate about being a trial lawyer, and why trial lawyers and the civil justice system plays such an important role in today's society. And so without further ado, let me formally introduce Mr. Beasley. Mr. Beasley is a native of Clayton, Alabama, which is located down in Barber County. He grew up playing sports, as I understand from listening to an interview, was a high school quarterback and even signed a scholarship to play at Georgia, but ended up graduating from Auburn University and then received his law degree from the University of Alabama School of Law in 1962. So he's been practicing law, I think this year, Mr. Beasley will be 57 years. And when he started his current law firm, the Beasley Allen Firm, in 1979, it was a one-lawyer shop, as they say. And now, I think 40 years later, they have some 85 attorneys and over 225 support staff. So I'm sure he couldn't have imagined that when he started that back in 1979, that it would have grown to be such a great law firm in the size that it has been today. Mr. Beasley served our state as lieutenant governor from 1971 to 1979. He has tried more than 30 cases to a verdict of over $1 million and over 15 cases to verdicts over $10 million. He's widely recognized by many organizations as one of the greatest trial lawyers in the country. And he's also known, and his firm is known for a lot of their philanthropic efforts for giving back to the community. So it's my honor and privilege today, folks, to welcome Mr. Jere Beasley as our guest today. Mr. Beasley, how are you doing, sir?
Morris, doing good, and really good to be on your program. I've really look forward to it and appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know you guys have a lot going on and you're pulled in a lot of different directions, so it's my privilege. Folks, if you're watching the live feed today, please say hello. Let us know if you've got any questions about the practice of law or Mr. Beasley's background or questions. We'll do our best to try to get to them. If you're watching the replay, please like and share the replay so we can get the message out. Because not only we're going to be talking to Mr. Beasley about his legal career and his background, but I also want to share a little bit about, take the insights from a great trial lawyer like Mr. Beasley and share with our community why trial lawyers and holding corporations accountable are so important, and their civil justice system so important. So share this message out. If you got questions after the fact, put it in the comments, and we'll try to monitor the comments later on in the days to come and get any feedback to you that way. Mr. Beasley, as I mentioned when I kicked off the show, I had the privilege to listen to an interview you did a few years ago. And you talked a lot about, and I could sense the passion that sports played in your life growing up. And here in the South, we all have a passion for sports. And I understand that you played a lot of different sports growing up. And I think you were the quarterback of your high school. And I think you even admitted, at least in that day, you were a pretty good quarterback growing up. And then you signed a scholarship to play Georgia. And I think you ended up playing 1 year in the junior college. I'm always interested to know what makes successful people tick and what the background that influences them. And a lot of people that I know that were very successful had a background in athletics. And I'm interested to know what, if any, characteristics and traits you learned as an athlete. And I understand that even in college, you coached a Babe Ruth baseball team that you learned that carried over to your legal career.
Well, I think any organized sport, it gives you the background. You learn to be organized. You have to put a great deal of effort, practice, of course. You have to be superbly prepared. I think practicing law and what we do today may be more like warfare than sports, though. In fact, it's extremely combative, and we have found that nothing's easy. And I was asked the other day to speak in Birmingham to a group of law students, lawyers, law professors, and some judges. And the gentleman who asked me to come up said, how about tell us about some of the cases where you believe that your firm has made a difference in corporate America, things like safety and things like that. I went back to my desk and asked my secretary, I said, how about pulling some of those reports that we've done we do this monthly Jere Beasley report. I said, give me a few of the cases that we've mentioned before that really made a difference. She came back with a list of 25, and that turned out to be just a few of the entire number that we've been involved in. In the last month's report, we actually listed, I think, 25 of those cases, or maybe 20, and every single one of them was where a company or an industry made significant safety changes, resulted in recalls. We exposed the silent recall program that General Motors had in effect back in the 1980s. A lot of people don't realize that federal government does a lousy job of regulation, both automobiles, drugs, and as a result, consumers have to have the court system.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people figure that if it passes, for example, the FDA or the Consumer Product Safety Commission standards, that it's safe. These, at best, Mr. Beasley, and I'm not a products liability lawyer expert, but these are minimum safety standards at best, right?
In fact, they are minimum to the extreme. NHTSA, the federal government, does a reasonably good job considering their resources. They miss a great deal. For example, the Toyota sudden acceleration problems that Toyota knew about for 10 solid years, withheld the information about all the problems they were having each year. General Motors had the the ignition switch failures where a car could be going down the highway at highway speed, and all of a sudden everything freezes up. You lose total control of the vehicle, steering, brakes, everything. 10 years, company knew about it, withheld the information intentionally. NHTSA finally found out about it, but the only way they found out about it was a lawsuit that Lance Cooper in Atlanta got us involved in, the Melton case. And the result there was an MDL was set up, recalls occurred. We actually had Delphi, the supplier of the ignition switch, call up one day and say, can we come visit with you? Got some information we'd like to share. So this supplier of the ignition module came to our office, brought a box full of documents, showed us one, and that document said, I'm paraphrasing it, here's basically what it said. General Motors sent specs and the plans and specs to Delphi. Delphi responded by saying, this won't work. There's a problem. Instead of correcting that problem, General Motors told them to go forward, and they did. And as a result, for 10 years, they were having problems all over the country. And without that case, without the Melton family, their daughter was killed. They really had the courage to take on a huge corporation.
Yes, sir. Well, and I think what people lose sight of is that the news media and the big corporations get out there, Mr. Beasley, and they make sound bites out of certain lawsuits that have been filed out there. And that's what America hears. And they hear that lawsuits are crazy. That's why malpractice rates for doctors are out of control. That's why products cost so much, is because all these dang lawyers and their dang lawsuits. And it's just, in the whole, Mr. Beasley, it's not true, is it? And in fact, these companies, and I know you've seen this a lot more than I have, but I've heard some of the stories, whether it's the Ford Pinto case, whether it's these more recent cases, that they know about these things, but they're putting profits over safety. They do a cost analysis, and they just determine, damn it, I'm not going to pay the extra cost to fix this or engineer this out, because the amount of liability claims and the cost of that will be far significantly less if they can ever prove it.
In fact, the first case that we ran into that was the Kubota tractor case, where a man's tractor rolled over, pinned him underneath, and he died out in probably July it was, and he died in the hot sun from shock. We got into that case and we found that Kubota and the entire industry knew that they were having rollovers, had stability problems. They didn't have the seat belts and the rollover protection on the tractors at that time. We got into the case and the family really had no intention to sue. All they did, they contacted Kubota, contacted the federal government, got no response from either. So they came to us and we filed the lawsuit. And we found that they actually knew that they were having the problem. They had done, as you said, a cost analysis. They actually had minutes of meetings where they had engineers and lawyers and accountants. They would project out the cost if we retrofit all the existing tractors in the field and the new ones we're going to have to equip with the roll bars and the seat belts. It'll cost us X number of dollars compared to what it would cost us if we settle lawsuits, keep it quiet, cover it up, and just pay claims as they come to us. And they looked at the difference. They decided it was cheaper for them to run the risk. And the actual documents said, we will run the risk. And so we got into the case and we found that, and the jury heard it, and they ended up settling the case after 5 days of trial, because we had the minutes of their meetings, which they did not know we had. They had fired a safety man, and he had actually come to us, had given us all the documents, and they had lied about it, said there was no such retrofit committee. And at trial, after 5 days, they knew they were in deep trouble, settled the case, and they wanted it confidential. Ms. Spivey said no to an offer of $10 million, said we will not settle the case if we've got to return the documents and not tell the public about how bad this company has been. So we told them that she was turning down the money for her family. They reconsidered, and we were able to settle the case with no confidentiality, had a news conference in front of the Montgomery County Courthouse the next day. And we showed the media, and it got national and actually international attention. And if you go to Kubota's website, say 6 months after that trial, they will put on their website, we Kubota have led the industry in providing ROPS protection for our tractors, and consumers are more safe as a result. Ms. Spivey was directly responsible for that.
Wow, that's amazing. That brings up a question that I did want to ask you, Mr. Beasley. And this is something that in a lot of lawsuits now, not necessarily maybe consumer product suits, but as a trial lawyer with as much experience in courtroom experience, and knowing that when you've got a case like this and you have the goods on a defendant, whether that's a corporation or in a lot of times what we've seen in the news in the last few years, maybe there's some allegations of sexual misconduct by someone, about non-disclosure agreements. Because I know a lot of times defendants want those because they said, look, you got us, we're willing to pay, but we don't want this to get out there. What's your position on that? When should those be used, if at all? And what's your plaintiff's doing that? That's a tough call as a plaintiff's lawyer, isn't it?
Well, we've run into that problem just frequently, almost every month. And clients are in a situation where either a death in the family, or you might have a catastrophic, disabling, permanent injury. Say a case we just tried, a 20-year-old who ends up paralyzed from the waist down. The family has a need. They know the need's there, and they know that they'll have a difficult time turning down an offer that has a confidentiality agreement. And we also run into the problem during the trials on sharing documents with other lawyers. Mm-hmm. And the companies generally take the position that these are confidential work product, can't be shared. Some judges, and fortunately more judges now, are requiring public interest to override their defense on that particular issue or their contention. But back to the confidentiality, I would hope that at some point, either Congress or state legislative bodies, and some have done this, would pass legislation saying that where public interest is the overriding factor, that confidentiality will not be allowed. And there's no reason for it, quite frankly, because if you've got, just take the Toyota case. We had to try a case in Oklahoma City before a very conservative jury, and the jury heard the evidence. And we had people on the jury with master's degrees. We had nurses on the jury. We had a medical professional on the jury, a corporate CEO. They heard this testimony and they were shocked at what they realized that Toyota for 10 years had hidden a known defect which had killed a lot of folks. And so we ultimately we settled the case after the jury returned a compensatory verdict of several $1 million, and the punitive was going to start the next day, where the same jury would hear the punitive phase. Well, before I could get in the car heading to the hotel, we got a call from their lawyers who had not offered one dime before the trial, offered a substantial amount of money. And the way they put it to me, they said, "What will it take to settle the punitive phase?" I gave them a number and they took it, and required confidentiality. And of course, the horse was already out of the barn because we'd already had the trial and all the publicity attended that came about as a result of it. So really the confidentiality didn't amount to anything.
Yes, sir. Real quick, Mr. Beasley, I want to thank everybody that's joining us. We've had several folks, Carol Williams down in Florida, Jake Watson, the lawyer here in Huntsville, John Russell, and Don McClure, Chip Nation, Christopher Nicholson out in Colorado, and Ben Cobb here in Huntsville. I want to thank you guys for joining us. I had a comment here from John Luca, maybe if it's pronounced his name. We was talking about profits over safety as an age-old problem, and he said the drug manufacturers are even worse. And I know you guys have been working on a lot of litigation with drug manufacturers, and I know you've been going to battle lately with Johnson & Johnson on these terrible talc cases that you've been representing a lot of families on.
Well, the drug companies, their problem is pretty simple. I say probably 2 decades ago, the doctors and the scientists ran the drug companies. Today, the marketing people run the drug companies, and safety has been put on the back burner. I can't think of another country in the entire world that allows drug companies to advertise prescription drugs on television. They pretty well run the show. The FDA, the government entity, understaffed, underfunded. I ask this question every time I get a chance to speak to a civic club where business folks are there. I'll say, how many drugs do you think the FDA actually does studies of before they approve them for market? And the hands go up, all the drugs are tested by the FDA. When you tell them that the FDA does not test one single drug, they're shocked. And they're taking the company's studies, the results. The prime example is Vioxx, the painkiller that had to be pulled from the market. And we handled the MDL litigation in New Orleans. And I think we settled that case for $5.4 billion with a B, where you had thousands of people all over the country. We found that halfway through the clinical studies, Merck, the drug company, pulled the studies and didn't report the information to the FDA. As a result, you had a painkiller out there that was causing heart attacks and strokes, and they were getting away with it until the courts got involved. And the way we found out about that, and if anybody's listening and doesn't know about Public Citizen, you need to find out. Go to citizen.org and learn about Public Citizen. Dr. Sidney Wolf was the medical director. He called one day and said, "Do you know about Vioxx?" Well, I didn't know anything about Vioxx. And he said, "You need to find out." He said, "They're killing folks." So we got involved and we found out he was exactly right. But had he not called us, chances are we would not have gotten in that litigation, because who would think that a painkiller put on the market saying it's the best thing since sliced bread would be killing folks with heart attacks and strokes and no warning?
Yeah. Well, I tell you something that I've learned, Mr. Beasley, in being contacted by that is the law, and this may be applicable just here in Alabama, but I know that there's some issues now with generic drugs that once a name manufactured drug is put on the market, if a generic company comes on and then gets approval for the generic and it's made up of the same compounds, I guess the central components of that, and they get approved, then as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, sir, that the generic can't be held liable for that, can it? I think there's some issues with that, isn't it?
It's on the labeling, whatever the FDA has gotten as far as the brand drug, the label, then the generics pick that up with nothing further, as I understand it.
Yes.
Andy Birchfield hands up our mass tort section, and anybody who has a specific question on that, I'll be glad to get Andy to respond to you.
Sure.
Right now, we probably I suspect that we probably are handling more drug company cases now than we ever have in the past. And it's amazing. Well, let's talk about Johnson & Johnson just for a second. First of all, the FDA, the regulation of this particular, the Johnson & Johnson talc products, the cosmetics, they are considered a cosmetic, so it does not receive the same scrutiny that a drug would have with the FDA. They have a division that handles it totally inadequately. I could show documents where back in the 1970s, I'm talking about 1970, where the chief medical person, the most respected person in the entire world, they said, wrote a memo to the president of Johnson & Johnson. I'm going to paraphrase what he said. He said, we have got to quit lying to the government and to our customers. The studies so far are against us, with more to come. And he said, unless we start playing it straight and telling the truth, we're going to be considered like the cigarette folks. And he said, and you know how that will be. What do you think Johnson & Johnson did with that memo? It trashed it, never did anything about it. And from that point forward, they were getting all sorts of information from studies, from folks, from doctors. And interestingly enough, they came up with 10 medical doctors and scientists who they wanted to use to defend their products as being safe. And the problem was the relationship between talc and ovarian cancer. So of these 10 people, right now, I believe we have 4 or 5 of them who are testifying as experts in trials that we've actually handled. These are the people that Johnson & Johnson had tried to hire, saying they were the best in the entire universe, and now they're incompetent because they're working for us, according to Johnson & Johnson. You know, when the mining company mines the talc, which is a mineral, they send it in containers to Johnson & Johnson. On the container, starting in about 2001, there's a label on that particular container that says, and I'm paraphrasing, possibly carcinogenic, warn ultimate user. The ultimate user of that product is basically a human being, and generally a female human being or a baby.
And then not a warning one on the bottle, is there, Mr. Beasley?
And now, in fact, you can go to Walmart tomorrow and go to the shelves where these products are there. You'll have some companies that have carcinogenic warnings, cancer warnings. Johnson & Johnson is still there with no warning. And they have gotten away with this. Now we know that it also has asbestos in the talc particles that are found when a woman dies and they do the test. They find in the ovaries the asbestos particles.
And yet, despite the fact that you guys have been holding their feet to the fire, and I know you've had several trials on this, multiple trials on this, and they've been in the plaintiff's favor, if I'm not mistaken, for large verdicts, they continue to die. I've seen on social media their president, following one of the large verdicts that your firm and other firms received, come out and continuing to deny the science and continuing to deny that there's any relation and just fighting it tooth and nail, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure. In fact, you can go back through their internal documents and you'll see where they say we have support in the U.S. Senate, we have support in the House of Representatives, we have allies there who will defend our positions. They say also that we can hoodwink the FDA because the fact that we are cosmetic and not a quote drug. It's amazing. In fact, every time I think I've seen the worst, something else pops up that's worse than what we had the day before.
Well, you know, one of the things that you were talking to and alluding to, and I know reading some articles and seeing some things on the trial lawyer listserv in the last day or two, you know, that kind of goes into the verdict, the large verdict against Ford your firm received last week. And congratulations to your client and the lawyers at your firm that took the lead on that. I know that was momentous work to take on Ford in that large of a case. But these companies are going to shift and move things wherever they can, and they're going to hire experts that they're going to pay tons and tons of money. And I think I saw somewhere where, and I'll speak to it if you want to, but how much Ford paid the expert that was their testifying expert to say that their vehicle was safe. And I'm sure Johnson & Johnson's doing the same thing. And these are just hired guns that are coming in there to speak the company line.
Morris, the expert you're talking about, the accident reconstructionist, they've paid him for trial testimony $75 million before this trial. $75 million to one expert. And he was totally ineffective in this trial. In fact, the facts of the case, how the accident actually happened, he couldn't live with what the live witnesses were telling the jury. So by the time he got on, he was totally ineffective, and he fumbled through his testimony, still made probably a bunch of money.
Well, it's just amazing that, that they're paid, they're hired guns, and they're coming in. And I mean, at the root of everything, I think you and I will agree, and then I think everybody watching this program, we want to get to the truth. And if the truth is there, that the company, that the product, or whether it's talc, a drug, or whether it's a product like a dangerous vehicle that's got a rollover problem they're doing, we want to know what's going on, and damn it, let's fix it so it doesn't hurt or kill somebody else. Because as the average consumer, I'm sorry, Mr. Beasley, I was going to say, the average consumer, we don't have time, the average consumer, to investigate this. We know that if that product, all we know, the average consumer knows, sir, is that product's for sale at Walmart, or that product's for sale at the Ford dealership. I assume it's safe. I don't have time to do that. I'm going to buy it and put my family in it if I can afford it.
Sure. In this case, all they had to do with Explorer is widen it and lower it. That was it. And that was a simple fix. They knew it. And all they did was change the air pressure and fiddled around with a few minor things and actually did some alterations that actually made it worse.
That's just amazing. If you're just joining us now, our guest on today's Most Show Live is attorney Jere Beasley. Mr. Beasley is founding member of the Beasley Allen Law Firm down in Montgomery, Alabama. Mr. Beasley has dedicated his career, and his firm is focused on providing representation for injury victims and fighting corporate America to make sure that the clients receive justice, and injuries and accidents that are out there due to corporate neglect and putting profits over safety is taken down, and his firm really champions that cause for a lot of their clients and causes around the country, really. Mr. Beasley, I want to be mindful of your time. I told you I was going to keep this here to 30 minutes here. I guess a question, I'd ask you is, I'm just curious, as someone, I've been practicing law now, I guess this will be my 16th year. Over the course of the last 50 years, I can't imagine the changes that you've seen in our profession. Just curious as to, something good that you think has developed in the last, years in your generation, whether that's technology, maybe something that's changed how the profession going, and maybe something you think is degraded in our profession, whether that's maybe how the civility between attorneys. I hear a lot of older lawyers tell me that there's not even though we're competitive in nature, but now there's not the civility that there used to be years ago. I'd love to get your take on that for those that are in the legal profession or looking to get into it.
Yeah, I'll go back to when I started, which is a long time ago. In Tuscaloosa, in fact, as I told you before the show started, I had two job offers when I graduated from law school. One was in Tuscaloosa and one was in Huntsville. And I took the Tuscaloosa job because it paid $400 compared to $350 in Huntsville a month. But I went to work for a defense firm, and all we did was defend insurance companies in automobile wrecks. And we would go to trial, and we would take maybe 2 file folders of trial preparation with us to the courthouse. Today, take the case we just finished in Alabama. We probably had millions of documents that had been turned over to us by Ford Motor Company. Same way with General Motors, same way with Toyota. We will have, in fact, no telling how many documents we had in this last case. I would say roughly in the millions would be a pretty good estimate. You have to go through every single one of them, and what they do, they'll dump all these extra documents on you that have nothing to do with the case. You've got to go through them and find the 10 or 12 that really have a bearing on that particular case. law practice has changed dramatically. Some of the rules have changed. Some of the ways you go about trying cases have changed. I do think you mentioned one thing that I'd like to just talk to lawyers now. Lawyers need to learn to be civil to each other because, first of all, if you're in a courtroom, a jury is going to be watching the lawyers extremely. They're going to watch you closely from the time you walk in until the trial is over. And I've seen lawyers do dumb things in court, act in an arrogant fashion with other lawyers, with people who are on the stand that they're cross-examining. I learned probably years ago, probably very early, you'd put 12 persons in a jury box. Those 12 people collectively are smarter than any lawyer I've ever dealt with. And they'll figure out, there's an old saying in Texas, big hat, no cattle. They can spot a phony before you can get out of that courtroom. I mean, they're going to figure it out real quick if you're trying to con them, if you're not being straight with them, and they'll figure it out. Somebody on the jury is going to spot it. And
Yes.
once you do, you ain't going to do well.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think as we wrap up? Just curious, speaking of that, doing, over the years, having the success that you've had, and then I know you've had the privilege to work with a lot of great trial lawyers out there. What do you think separates the good trial lawyer from the great trial lawyer? What is there a characteristic or a couple of traits that you, other than just hard work, what do you think separates the good from the great from the good?
First of all, you got to put your client first, their interest before your personal interest. A lot of lawyers let their egos get involved and sort of push the client's interest to the side, and a jury can pick up on that quickly. You got to really care about your clients, and you've got to believe in their cause. You've also got to believe in the jury system. You got to believe that the Constitution means what it says when they guarantee a jury trial to every citizen in this country. And that's for individuals and corporations. I guess now that a corporation under our Supreme Court is considered a person, which I find kind of hard to understand, but public citizen says that a corporation has a constitutional right to free speech, which is dumb, but true.
Yes, sir. Well, Mr. Beasley, I want to thank you for all you and your firm are doing to fight on behalf of consumers and individuals. And I've enjoyed working with your firm over the years and gotten to know a lot of the folks in your firm. You've got a lot of great people down there, and I know you do a lot, not only in the cases that you handle, but you guys do a lot giving back to the community. And I think that's something that a lot of the general public doesn't see, that they should know more about, but that a lot of great lawyers around this country do a lot to give back to the causes that they care about and the consumers that they help. And I think they should, and I think it's great that you do it. And I'm proud to know your members of your firm and gotten to know you a little bit.
Mark, let me just mention one thing.
Yes, sir.
The biggest compliment that our firm can get, and we hear it quite often, is that we do it the right way for the right reason. And I truly believe that is factually correct. I don't think we have anybody in our firm. We have in-house investigators, clerical people, paralegals or legal assistants, lawyers at every level. And I really believe that we've instilled in everybody here a principle that requires us to do it the right way and to do it for the right reason. And I hope that, I know everybody here understands that. And if they don't understand it, they got to go.
Well, and I think there's something to be said for that. And you know what? As you mentioned just a few minutes ago, coming full circle, your client will sense that, and the jury's going to sense that. And,
Absolutely.
And one of the bigger compliments that you can receive is that after you represent a family or an individual, that they then year to 10 years later, they send somebody else to you because they say, Jere Beasley took care of me. He treated me like a family member, and he fought for me. And you need to go see my lawyer, Jere Beasley, and or whoever at your firm. Those are the kind of things that I know over your course of your career you've heard over and over again. But that speaks volumes because what others say about you those members of the community are going to listen. And they only going to say that, though, if they've truly felt that way.
Well, I appreciate it, and I've enjoyed this session with you. In fact, we could go on for a while. I've enjoyed it.
Yes, sir. Well, Mr. Beasley, thank you for your time. Everybody, if you're watching, please like and share the show. We shared some great things that I even learned a lot. And Mr. Beasley, we had some lawyers in the comments over here that were watching, that were commenting on some things that they learned that the FDA doesn't even test the drugs themselves. So there's a lot of great knowledge shared in here, some great information that I think the public should know about and that lawyers can learn from too. So please like and share the show. Everybody, thank you so much, Mr. Beasley. Thank you for your time, sir. And that'll be it till that next Mo Show Live. Thank you, everybody.